Well, good evening. We're so excited to have you all here for that webinar that finally got you talking about presbyopia-correcting IOLs. This is going to be a great hour that we're going to have, lots of discussion, a lot of interaction. One thing I do want to remind you all is that we do have a chat box as well. So if you have any questions for any of our panelists, please feel free to put it in the chat box. My name is Walt Whitley, and I'm the Director of Optometric Services at Virginia Eye Consults in Norfolk, Virginia. We are a tertiary referral care practice. We have all the various subspecialists. A lot of my partners you may know, Liz Yu, John Shepard, Steve Scoper. And so my role within the practice is anything we do within ophthalmology is to make sure that optometry is well represented. And so I have the pleasure to moderate this evening with some of my friends here, and I'm going to have them introduce themselves. So Nicole, you want to start us off?
Sure. Welcome, everyone. My name is Nicole Fram. I'm a complex cataract, cornea, refractive specialist in Los Angeles, California, Advanced Vision Care.
Tanner?
I'm Tanner Ferguson. I recently completed my fellowship at Vance Thompson Vision in cornea, glaucoma, cataract, and refractive surgery, and I'm staying on there in Sioux Falls.
And Brian?
My name is Brian Shafer. I am 1 week into owning my own practice, Shafer Vision Institute. I opened the doors just last week. I'm a cataract, refractive, cornea, and glaucoma surgeon. Excited to be here with you all.
Yeah, so this is going to be a great evening where we're going to have great discussion about the various aspects when it comes to presbyopia-correcting IOLs. And so we've all worked together here on this panel before. And so excited to hear your thoughts and your on how you handle a lot of these issues that we're going to address. So here's our agenda. Where do we begin? We know that presbyopia, this happens. This is going to affect 100% of us as we grow up. We know that cataracts are inevitable. As we grow up, we wrinkle, we gray, we dry up, we get cataracts. And so we'll talk about the prevalence of cataracts. Where does it impact all of our practices and our patients? We're going to talk about addressing both the patient and eye care provider expectations, because we know that it's important for all of us to be on the same page, but also preparing our patients through this cataract journey. And so we're going to get various pearls from our panelists here. So what about amazing? What does amazing look like? And how can we define potential treatment outcomes? And we know we have various IOLs that are on the market that we're having great results today, and our patients are getting that improved quality of vision as well as quality of life, but we also have many more in the pipeline. And so this is an exciting time for this once-in-a-lifetime decision for our patients. And then on the education support, who are our partners, whether it's our colleagues who we collaborate with, whether it's our team and our staff, or whether it's our industry partners that help us with some of the educational tools that we can provide to our patients. And so where do we begin? Well, this is a journey. And so we do have to start somewhere, and it's important for us to know those numbers. And so we are all familiar with the cataract tsunami, even though this says wave. We know that we are seeing many, many patients that do suffer from quality of life issues when it comes to the impact that cataracts can have. 95 million people worldwide have cataracts. 24.4 million Americans age 40 and older have cataracts. And we know that we're seeing a lot more patients younger and younger because it's about quality of life and quality of vision and how it impacts them on a daily basis. We know that, traditionally we've been told, hey, for cataract surgery, it has to be 20/40 minus or worse, but it's all about their quality of life. If they have cataracts, if it's impacting their quality of life, then those are patients that could be candidates for not just cataract surgery, but presbyopic correcting IOL procedures. And then looking at the amount of patients, over half the Americans by age 75 do have cataracts. And so these are just some of the numbers. Well familiar with where we are within the demand of eye care services. We know that by 2030, there's going to be about a 30% increase in demand for medical eye care services. We know by 2030, there's also going to be about a 33% increase in patients who need cataract surgery. So if we're looking at an opportunity, if we're looking at a way to grow our practice, and we know that when it comes to reimbursement, we know that there's always threats for decrease in reimbursement, but looking at elective procedures, looking at cash-based services, how can we grow our practice and how can we seize on this opportunities. And so the decision-making behavior, there's numerous factors and trends, whether it's on the left, the patient-based factors on the lens selection, and you can read all those there, or on the right, the trending behaviors of today's presbyopic correcting IOL patients. And so I'm going to start with you, Nicole. You can comment on either left or right side, but what are the impacts this is having on the decision-making behavior for our patients?
Well, I think that it's an exciting time because the technology is actually performing, whereas in the past, there were so many caveats that we had to talk about when we talked about different multifocal lenses or even extended depth of focus lenses. So we're getting closer to being able to deliver on the promise of full range of vision or less dependence on glasses. The hardest part is that's a double-edged sword. So if you have all of those choices, how do you discuss that with a patient and make sure that they can absorb it during a visit when they may be coming in with anxiety and many other feelings? And sometimes when you have anxiety, you can't hear. So what I like to do is really ask them what they do all day. So I can't delegate this process to someone else. I have to understand, what do you do when you wake up? Do you put your glasses on all the time? Are you using them to look at your phone? That's a big question. And then I ask them, let me see the font on your phone. Because if the font's real big, I'm like, I can nail that. But if the font is small, you really have to think about, I don't want to take away something that they can do well now. That's the best way to get someone to be upset after surgery. So these lifestyle choices involve understanding what they do with their lifestyle. Then I really kind of narrow the menu from there. So if somebody takes their glasses off all the time to read, they don't mind wearing distance glasses, then you're going down one road with a patient. If someone doesn't want to wear reading glasses, doesn't want to wear them for anything, they're mixed astigmatism, then you have to think about an extended depth of focus or a trifocal technology. But I don't give them a menu and make them choose. I try and match it to what their lifestyle is or what they want it to be. Side effects, I don't delegate this to a counselor as well. I will go over the different side effects of the lenses, because the last thing we want is for a patient to say, you never told me. And I tell them at the end, this is your choice. You can wear glasses for everything, or you can try this new technology.
So question for you, are you utilizing any questionnaires with the patient preoperatively? That way you have this idea before you see them?
Yeah, I always use a questionnaire there's two reasons to use it. One is you can actually learn a lot from it, particularly their type of handwriting. And the other thing is that you can also use it as a medical legal document in stating that you did discuss, and go over the questionnaire. So I use it for two reasons. So Tanner, are you using the questionnaire at all?
Yeah, I think we also use the questionnaire as well. I admittedly don't always review that before I discuss this with the patient. I really rely on the patient conversation, especially when it comes down to lifestyle choices, side effects, and range of vision. Those are the biggest things I think about when I'm trying to match the technology or option to that patient. But yeah, what about you, Brian?
I'm not currently utilizing a questionnaire, but I love everything you guys have said. And I'll use a different phrase that I like to use. I like to marry the lens to the patient's eye, because that's really what it is. And I think of our job as being the matchmaker, and specifically the OD co-manager is the true matchmaker, because they're the ones who know what that patient's visual status has been for many, many years. And they know, if, like Nicole said, if they like to take their glasses off to read, don't mess that up. That's how you get an angry patient. So actually, in my practice, I've kind of simplified things, and I'm sure we'll get into this again later, but I've simplified it to bypass this sort of a la carte menu that a lot of us historically have given to the patients, because it's hard enough for us to understand these lenses. How can we expect our patients to? So I actually just put it into two categories: standard vision correction or customized vision. In standard, I just say, no problem, insurance minus copay and deductible. You can expect to be in glasses full-time afterwards. If you're looking for a little bit more and for an in-depth conversation where we decide what lens we can best marry to your eye to meet your lifestyle expectations, that's where we go down the customized vision. And for some people, that means that they end up with a toric monofocal for near. For some people, that's going to be extended depth of focus in both eyes. And in other people, it's going to be a small aperture IOL in one eye and a light adjustable lens in the other eye. And I keep it simple, and I actually keep it the same cost just to keep it simple so patients don't make the wrong choice based on cost alone. So it's a really exciting time because we do have these expanded options available to us that I'm excited for us to get into in more detail in a few moments.
So, Brian, you just mentioned cost. Can you talk about, how do you have that cost discussion and, the value versus cost? What does that sound like?
It's a really important conversation to not fumble over, because the second you fumble, the second they feel like you're a salesman, because that's not what we are. This technology actually does cost us money, and therefore our job is to make sure that the patient is paying for something of value. So what I say to them always is I say, if you want to wear glasses full-time afterwards, no problem, save your money. But if you're looking to customize your vision a little bit more, there is a cost associated with that. Now, for that cost, you get the lens technology, but most importantly, you get that really in-depth conversation with me where we decide what lens is best for you. Additionally, you kind of buy an insurance package at the same time because you have an extended global period with me for a full extra 90 days. So you've got 6 months of covered postoperative care. You've got a laser fine tune if needed. If I miss the refractive target and I promised you that I wouldn't, I owe that to you. And that's all included in the same cost. So I promise you that there's not anything hidden within this. My job is to just make you happy afterwards. And if you think that you'd be just as happy wearing glasses full time, that's okay too. But if you're looking for a little bit more, that's where the customized vision comes in. And that's how the conversation always goes. And frankly, patients appreciate the honesty, and many, if not most of these patients end up converting because they are looking for a little bit more.
Mm-hmm. And they're seeing value, right? Value in the technology. And you just mentioned matchmaking and marrying the lens to the patient. So matching technology to the patient and patient to the technology. Nicole, one of the things that I really like that you said is you're using real world examples. It's not J1 plus or what that number is. It's, can you read your tablet? Can you read your phone? And make it more real world for our patients. And so, there's a lot of different factors when it comes to making that decision, what type of vision the patient wants, looking at the value. And so these are some of the challenges. And so thank you all for commenting on that. So if we look at real world, what are our patients saying? And it's going back to quality of life and quality of vision. And so here's just some examples of some patients had to turn to my glasses to read everything before. Now the quality of life that had worsened compared to before cataracts has been recovered. The whole new world, couldn't imagine to see so well. And we've heard all these things. Nicole, tell me what one of your patients has said recently about these lenses.
Well, I just gotta, it never gets old when a patient says, I'm so happy after surgery. I mean, I always tell them it's a privilege to take care of you. And it really always feels like the first time, because it is one of the greatest professions to be involved in. And so I try not to take it for granted. I got a text the other day from a patient that, said, I can't believe I waited so long. I never knew I could see as well as I did when I was 15 years old. And, this was a patient that had a PanOptics that all his friends were talking him out of. And he really wanted to see at all distances. He didn't drive a lot at night. And he was willing to go down the road with me. And I said to him, 1 to 3%, I might have to remove it. But that's very, very rare, more like 1%. And I'm there for you in this journey. And he was thanking me to really take the leap with him to get him out of glasses. And so it doesn't get old. It's a wonderful thing.
Yeah. And Tanner, can you talk to us about the opportunity from either a medical or a psychological standpoint and on what patients are saying?
Yeah. First, I'll just highlight that quote on the bottom saying they can see perfectly now. That must be a Shafer post-op. But yeah, I think, the options we have available now clearly provide a substantial improvement in the quality of life. This is supported by good data. I think there's a nice quality adjusted life year study, comparing a trifocal versus a monofocal, showing that the quality of life improvements of the trifocal are pretty substantial. And, I think thinking about the quality of life impact and assuming the patient's appropriate candidate, I think, trying to decide what option is best for them, it goes back to understanding the patient's goals, their lifestyle, and then, using Brian's phrase, marrying the lens to that patient, whether it be a trifocal, extended depth of focus, or another option.
Brian, what's your patient's been saying?
They're giving hugs, and I give the hug back.
Awesome.
But can I just make one comment? I think that, I am it's the joke that I'm the garbage can of Los Angeles. So, people that have issues come to our office and we try and help them with it after surgery. And actually doctors feel safe sending it here because I often tell them, if you have a problem, I would have put the same exact lens in, And so I think, yes, we're talking about happy patients, but some people, when you have a patient that's having trouble, you just kind of go like this when you're in the room with them. And then, what you really want to do is lean into them and listen. And patients will always feel more cared for and feel that you are a better doctor when you lean in rather than, just kind of say, oh, it's dry eye. Oh, it's, you just need to adapt. Oh, let's laser that capsule, So, I think it is important that if you're going to put these types of lenses in, that you support them in that period, that they're dating the lens and they haven't gotten married.
Yeah, and that's something I heard from every one of you is saying, if for some reason we're not hitting that mark, hey, I'm here with you. This is the steps that we're going to take. And just like, as you mentioned, Nicole, they're hearing it from you. You're leaning in, and so they know that you're in there for their best interest. And so we do know that this does improve quality of life, and those are just some examples. Well, let's take a look at the market. And here you can see 49% increase in AT-IOL penetration from 2016 to 2021. The yellow, you can see the total premium share. The gray is going to be toric IOLs. And you can see the presbyopic correcting torics in the orange, and then the blue is presbyopic correcting IOLs. Are you all surprised by this data? I mean, because if we look at torics alone, we know that over 35% of the patients have over a diopter of corneal astigmatism. Wouldn't you think that number would be higher? What are your thoughts there, Brian? We'll start with you.
I think that number should be higher for sure if we're truly treating all patients who have that level of corneal astigmatism. And I always like to say, would you ever give a patient a pair of glasses that doesn't have the astigmatism put into them? No, you would never do that. So why wouldn't you take care of that at the time of cataract surgery when you have that opportunity? But I think what's truly striking about this chart in and of itself, and we'll talk about why there's less penetration globally than there possibly could be. If you look at the orange line, this accounts for all of that growth in the total premium share of AT-IOLs. It's the presbyopia-correcting IOLs. And that, I believe, is because the technology from 2016 to 2021 improved so dramatically. We got our first trifocal IOL. We got our first non-diffractive EDOF IOL. We've got really good lenses now that are now able to deliver on that promise that we're trying to give our patients. And I'm not surprised to see that it's going up. And I just hope it continues to trend upwards as well.
Nicole?
Yeah, I had the same shock over the toric. That means that, as educators, we may not be teaching how to use it successfully and screen successfully. I think it also means that people don't know what to do if they don't have the right preoperative testing or intraoperative technology to help them achieve their targeted goals. So I think that has a lot to do with confidence. And I think we can all work on that. I totally agree with Brian that it was really between 2019 and 2021 that we're seeing finally technology that does have tolerable nighttime symptoms, that does have excellent distance, intermediate and near, and not just one or two or the other. So I fully agree. And as long as we understand, as Tanner said, how to match the technology given their pre-existing conditions, and I was listening to you, Tanner, then you're going to have success. But there's no one size fits all. But there are some easy buttons that we're going to talk about later on.
Yeah. Tanner, anything to add?
I was thinking about this graph as well and thinking that it was likely to continue to rise as the options expand, because we have options now available that I think have kind of expanded our percentage of patients who are candidates for this technology. So if this graph is including, like an adjustable lens, such as LAL, which is a monofocal IOL, then I would expect this, percentage to continue to rise.
For the mini monovision strategy, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so we know that healthcare is a business. And so in order to grow, you have to track your numbers. Are you all tracking your conversions, and are you separating them out? Are you tracking patient satisfaction? Are any of you doing that? And anyone can comment on that. I just kind of threw that in there.
It's become a lot easier using some of these software databases, such as Veracity, and Alcon has a digital database that you'll be able to record on. You can just search it and you come up with your IOLs, and you can look at your refractive results based on the type. I mean, the other day I wanted to see, how are my Vividi patients doing? How are my Symphony patients doing? And it was really, it's helpful because you don't know if you're doing well until you look in the mirror. And then it only takes one patient that is having a tough time. And then you're like, well, I'm not using that lens anymore. Well, what if you had 500 that were happy? And, you don't want one patient to dictate, your whole future with a technology. So I find it really important, especially when you're implementing new technology, to look in the mirror and look at how your outcomes are doing and optimize your lenses.
Well, let's go over to some of these IOLs. Brian, if you can lead us through the next few slides, and we'll go over all the implants that are available now.
I will gladly do so. This is one of my favorite topics, the defocus curve. Why is that funny, Tanner?
It's the king of defocus curves right here.
The defocus curve is something that I didn't ever hear about when I was in residency training. I didn't know it existed. I didn't know it was a thing. I never knew that it could exist. But the defocus curve is so important as new technology becomes available, especially for those of us who are on the leading edge of early adoption and are willing to try out these new technologies. We want to be able to understand, at least potentially, what we can expect our patients to see at different distances prior to us even implanting the lens. The defocus curve is what shows us that. And the FDA mandates that all new IOLs publish their defocus curves. And therefore, we have something that we can compare against before we even implant one. So what exactly is the defocus curve? In general, the defocus curve shows you what you can expect a patient's visual acuity to be at different distances. This right here is a defocus curve of emerging presbyopic patients. This was a study that we did actually, and it's really illustrative of what is happening to a defocus curve over time. So I'm going to force you all to think back to basic optics 101. There's a simple formula. Focal length equals 1 over diopter.
Got it.
Yeah, okay, good. You passed. There are only 3 really important focal lengths that we talk about when discussing new IOLs. One of them is at infinity, that's distance, and that's a defocus step of 0. This is a patient who's got no defocus. Their manifest refraction is put in front of them, and they've got no defocus in front of them. Then we often talk about intermediate being 66 centimeters. Well, how do we get to 66 centimeters at a defocus step? 1 divided by 1.5 is 0.66 meters, 66 centimeters. So what you're actually doing to the patient here is you put in their manifest refraction to give them their best corrected distance vision. And then you progressively defocus them in half diopter steps. You put minus 0.5 in front of them, minus 1, minus 150, and you measure what is their actual visual acuity at those defocus steps. So when you have them set to emmetropia, that's a defocus step of 0, and you look on the y-axis here, and you can see their visual acuity. On the left y-axis, you have their logmar vision, and on the right y-axis, you have the Snellen equivalent. So at a defocus step of 0, that's emmetropia. At a defocus step of minus 1.5, That is 66 centimeters or intermediate vision. Similarly, if you get to a defocus step of minus 2.5, 1 divided by 2.5 is 4.4, 0.4 meters, 40 centimeters. That's what we all talk about as near vision. So what you can see on these defocus curves are, if you look at the orange line, that's 37 to 39-year-olds. The way we describe that defocus curve is flat, because these patients can still accommodate. So if you progressively defocus a myope or an emmetrope who's young and can accommodate, and you put myopic lenses in front of them, they're going to be able to accommodate through that. Think about all of our young patients who over-accommodate. If you look at the progressive ages, moving up in age, look at what happens at age 40 to 42. Starting at a defocus step of minus 1.5, they start to do what we call fall off the defocus curve. What that means is that their vision is progressively getting worse at these near ranges. Importantly, we consider logmar of 0.2 to be the level of visual acuity that is considered acceptable. So if you look at these different ages, starting at age 46 to 48, all of a sudden, even at intermediate ranges, they're really starting to fall off. And as you get to a near defocus step of 40 centimeters or minus 2.5, you see a big splitting because they're really starting to fall off the defocus curve because they're no longer able to accommodate. So let's put this into a real world example. Let's move forward here. And you can see that this is the logmar of 0.2. And I want you to look at these three ovals and that logmar of 0.2 as we go through all of the IOLs that are available on the market right now, so that you can see how we can expect a patient's vision to be at these different distances. So let's start this off by talking about the Vividi lens. If we move forward here, we can see the Vividi lens is a non-diffractive, extended range of vision IOL. What I mean by that is that you don't have circles of diffraction where light is splitting. Instead, you have a central area of the optic of the lens that's a little bit steeper, and it creates this continuous extended focal range by stretching the wavefront rather than splitting it. So what can we expect their vision to be? Let's look at the defocus curve. The black dots here are the Vividi lens. The circles are the monofocal control. The general shape shows us what we can expect. And what you can see, if you follow the defocus step of 0, at a defocus step of 0, you expect a patient's vision to be 20/25, 20/20. And that's what we see here. Logmar of 0 is 20/20, logmar of 0.1 is 20/25. We expect 20/20 here. As we move to a defocus step of minus 1.5, remember that's the intermediate range. We can see that the Vividi lens still hovers above logmar of 0.2 versus the monofocal control, which drops below logmar of 0.2. However, when we get to our near range, minus 2.5, both have fallen off the defocus curve. And this is why it's so critical when we're implanting Vividi lenses that we do not promise our patients excellent near vision. We can promise them that they're going to have acceptable intermediate vision because it's above logmar 0.2 in greater than 50% of patients. But as you get to a logmar of minus 0.25 or 2.5 rather, you're at logmar 0.5. That's 20/60 vision. That's not phenomenal near vision. It's phenomenal intermediate vision, but not phenomenal near vision. And looking at this defocus curve, we can expect that. And as long as we expect that, we can expect to see that result in our patients. And when they're not seeing it near, it doesn't mean something went wrong. It means that it lived up to its defocus curve. So let's go through a couple of the other IOLs. So using the defocus curve so that you can see what we can expect. I'm going to kick it over to you, Nicole.
Well, I think you did a great job there, and especially about patient expectations with the Vividi lens. What's so interesting about that lens, Brian, is that some of my patients can read. And I think that's what tripped everyone up in the beginning. And I think, I think we've talked about this before. It's pupil size that probably determines the depth of focus. So the smaller the pupil size with the Vividi lens, the more your depth of focus that you could get. But I do think you explained that just expertly. So I'm going to get into the Symphony IOL. It's an extended depth of focus IOL, and it's a diffractive lens. So this is splitting light, but it has this echelette design, which is this high resolution lathing. And because of that, the technology has been developed to change the height of these actual rings to elongate the focus. And so they're not these abrupt kind of edges anymore, where you have a high focal point and then you get a dip, you see a halo, a high focal point, you get a dip and you see a halo. So there are some glare and halos with this lens, but the elongated depth of focus is really what is most impressive. And the fact that when you look at the defocus curve on the next slide, you'll see that there's this broadening that happens there. So in this lens, you can see that when you're at 66 centimeters or at minus 1.5 on the defocus curve, you're still within that 0.1 logmar 2025. And really, you want to think about J3, which is about 2030, 2040 on your near card. That's where patients are going to be expected to be. But if you're a plus 50 or a minus 50 on your refractive target, you can still have excellent vision. And so you don't have to be exactly on target with this lens. Now, you would like to be, but it has this broad defocus curve that allows you to achieve excellent distance vision and also intermediate vision. Now, with this lens, you do have to be careful, because if you aim too myopic, then the nighttime symptoms become a bit more obvious. But this is an excellent lens for someone who values distance, wants to see dashboard, intermediate, computer. And then once you achieve that in their dominant eye, you can consider other lenses that may give more near if that's what they're after, such as the Symphony lens or Synergy lens. So let's go to the next slide. So the Synergy lens is really an incredible lens that has a very, very steep defocus curve. So you must hit your target. This is going to give you distance, intermediate, and near, and it's probably the best near vision on the market, because you can see even at 2.5, minus 2.5, you're able to achieve excellent near vision. So this is for a person that absolutely wants to have excellent near vision. Now, using this lens, you have to hit your target. And really, when you're myopic, too myopic with this lens, there's this waxy vision that happens. So you want to pick your lenses on the plus 50 to plano side. So really your first plus to plano. And you can see the reason why is that as you're going to infinity on this defocus curve, if you're off by more than that, they're really not going to be able to achieve that 2020 to 2025 vision. So this is really the same concept of varying the heights of the echelettes and the width of the echelettes to achieve this distance, near, and intermediate vision. The biggest thing that is impressive about this technology in general is that there is this violet filter, and the violet filter also on the Symphony and on the Synergy allows for filtering of the blue wavelength, or the shorter wavelengths that are more so associated with dysphotopsia. And so although there still are dysphotopsia with any diffractive technology, even when you stretch light, you do have some dysphotopsia. There's much less, about 33% less, by implementing this OptiLight technology and this violet filter. So we know these lenses have done great with achromatic correction and chromatic aberration correction. Then with this high resolution lathing, and on top of that, having this wider range of vision that's pupil independent, has been a real boost for this technology. So these patients, I would choose a patient for a Synergy that really valued near vision, but wants it all.
Tanner, you want to take us through the multifocals?
Yeah. Yeah. So, kind of talking more about diffractive traditional multifocal options. I think this graph here is kind of showing how our previous generation multifocal IOLs have evolved to now existing trifocal options. And as Brian and Nicole both just alluded to, diffractive optics by definition splits incoming light. And with respect to the trifocal options, they do this to provide functional distance at distance, intermediate, and near. But the drawback of that is the dysphotopsias that come with that. But comparing the new trifocal IOLs to the previous, I maybe say bifocal options, incorporating the intermediate focal point actually strengthens the near point. So the trifocal IOLs actually have reduced incident light loss compared to the old Restore or Technis, ZK-BOO, ZL-BOO, etc. And then moving on here to the PanOptix defocus curve. So I'll quickly go through this here since Brian did such a wonderful job explaining how to interpret these defocus curves. So PanOptix, trifocal versus a monofocal control. Looking at the intermediate and near, you can see a pretty demonstrable difference in the vision with close to 0.1 at intermediate and right in between there, 0.05 at near. So, thinking about the PanOptix, in a patient who has no concomitant ocular pathology and really desires spectral independence, this is my go-to option.
So those are some of the implants that are commonly used for presbyopia-correcting IOLs. Brian, you mentioned you do mix and match. Are you all doing that quite often, or is that case by case? Nicole, I also heard for the extended depth of focus, you're doing the dominant eye first and then adjusting for the non-dominant eye if they need more near. Is that correct?
Yeah, I think it's an excellent strategy. If you put, the IOL that is better for distance and you make sure you nail the distance, you can then titrate what they need for near. And many surgeons are doing Symphony in the dominant eye and the non-dominant eye doing Synergy. And that's because it's harder to hit the distance target with Synergy because of that steep defocus curve.
Yeah, patients, great, they can see up close, but they can't see in the distance. They're not going to be very happy with their outcome. And so if we look at how do we address both patient and eye care providers' expectations, it's all going to be about education. And, this is a cataract journey. The earlier we start the education, the more educated the patient is in this once in a lifetime decision, then the higher the patient satisfaction is going to be. And so if we look at the gap between patient preferences and cost, there was a survey here on the left that was asked a couple years ago to some of our colleagues, and the preferred IOL if personally undergoing cataract surgery. And here you can see multifocals with 69%, and you can see the monofocals as well as the torics there. But if we look on the right, the importance of a strong recommendation. 45% of patients are willing to trade up to an advanced technology IOL and willing to pay more. However, only 18% of patients are getting the advanced technology lens. And so we briefly mentioned the importance of that strong recommendation. Any comments on this discrepancy from any of you? Brian, I'll just pick you.
Yeah, it's so fascinating seeing how even your own mood changes your conversion rate. Mm-hmm. The way in which you come across on an individual day will change the percent of patients that will choose to upgrade their IOL. And it's all about the language that we use, the demeanor that we use, and using the principle that I learned from my fellowship at Vance Thompson, where Tanner is now, which is that people don't care what you know until they know that you care. And once they know that you care, they're yours and they're going to follow your recommendation. And what I think is happening on those days where you're just not feeling yourself, or I should say, I'm not feeling myself, it's maybe my patients don't realize that I truly care as much, so they're not as willing to follow the recommendation. So it's so important to just prove to your patient that you care. And first, of course, just care.
And they're going to see if we believe in the technology or not, because they can read it, just from our expressions, as you just mentioned. So let's look at some of the potential pain points and contributing factors that can happen in the practice, whether they're on the left, increasing patient awareness of the lens options, the innovative technologies that are in the pipeline, or on the right side, increased demand for education from patients, patient financial concerns. How are you combating these challenges in your practice, Nicole?
Yeah,
Beginning of
turnover is really tough. We have wonderful people in our practice. A lot of them are pre-med students, and they come for a couple years and then they move on. And that's amazing and rough all at the same time. And so we've been implementing Alchemy Vision has a online training platform to get everyone on the same level. It doesn't really teach them how we speak to patients. So whenever someone starts in our practice, they have to hang out with me, unfortunately, for, a week or so, hearing the way we speak to patients, going back to what Brian said about hearing the way we care for our patients. And I think, if you just have to accept it, you can't keep fighting it and say, well, in my day, people used to stay for 14 years. It just isn't happening. So how do you create an environment where the staff turnover is expected and you will be able to still run a well-oiled machine given that situation? And so these online platforms such as Alchemy have been really helpful. The other thing I learned from Paul Singh is that on Fridays, once a month, we close the office down on the Friday afternoon and we educate. If you do not educate your staff, you will be in a world of hurt. There's so many new technologies coming every year. That's been the best way to be early adopters and implement new technology with confidence. So if you walk in the room and you say, well, I don't really know how it works, but it's supposed to be good because Brian told me it was going to be good. And that's not going to, really resonate very well. So that's another thing that we do in our office is we have constant education. And that helps us kind of combat these pain points that we've experienced over the years.
Tanner?
Yeah, I think kind of piggybacking on what Nicole said, I think educating your staff is so important. And I think every new hire we have goes through kind of a formalized educational process in our practice. But we also do education every Monday morning, kind of like a morning huddle that's distributed to everybody within the organization, ranging from a tech to finance to front desk people. And I think that's really helpful for getting people on the same page. And then more on education, we don't necessarily per se use like a script, but we provide a lot of feedback and teaching early on, a lot of shadowing to help everybody get on the same page. Because I think when you're educating patients, especially when it comes to presbyopia-correcting IOLs, you want to have a very consistent messaging, because I think that helps build trust with the patient. And yeah.
Brian, any other comments on anything else on this slide?
It's just one comment to reiterate something that Nicole said early on when she was first talking. And that's, she was mentioning that she does the counseling herself. Mm-hmm. And I agree wholeheartedly, because if you entrust somebody else to do that for you, it's not coming from you. And then if they leave, the message changes with them. But you are consistent and the message stays with you. And you are the one who's staying up on all of this, and your patients are trusting you. The ability to delegate that sort of thing is a wonderful, wonderful thing. But I personally attribute my conversion rate to the fact that I do the counseling myself. And I am that point of contact for the patient without relying on my team to be doing that. And then you can utilize your team to do all sorts of other wonderful things to maintain the patient experience and maintain the flow.
Yeah. You all mentioned huddles or you closing the office down for education. You're going to keep hearing education. Everybody needs to be on the same page. But we also have to celebrate our wins, right? The patients or our staff need to hear about that happy patient, because if not, they're not hearing about the high patient satisfaction we're having with these presbyopic IOLs. Then they may sabotage it and say, oh no, it's not worth the money, or don't do that. And so it's important that everybody sees how successful that these implants are delivering the quality of vision that our patients are looking for. And so, patients would like a better grasp of their lens options and rely on the surgeon for guidance, just like our colleagues have just mentioned here. 82% of patients want to know their lens options, but only 36% may know what type are available. And so going back to the cataract process, and one of the things that we do, and then, before I have to send a patient to Liz or Steve, I say, hey, you have an early cataract. The good news is you're doing fine with your glasses, you're doing fine with your contacts. But when it's time for cataract surgery, we have exciting options for you available. And I'll give them some information, say, hey, we don't need it yet, but the more engaged the patient is throughout, the higher patient satisfaction is going to be. And then here you can see on bottom, with all the panelists alluded to, 96% of patients rely on their surgeon for guidance, but only 33% of patients are receiving that recommendation. And so how do we control the narrative? How are we educating our patients? How are we making that strong recommendation is going to be important for our patients. And so you all mentioned that you all are doing the counseling preoperatively. So what is that handoff like, Tanner? So you made your recommendation. You said, hey, you're going to be a great candidate for the trifocal IOL. So are they going straight to the surgery counselor? What is that conversation with the scheduler?
Yeah, so in our practice, we have counselors dedicated to scheduling, and then kind of wrapping up the counseling discussion, and then helping them pick a date. But I think everybody does it a little bit differently. But I wanted to just highlight something you just said about kind of initiating that conversation. And I think, looking at these numbers here, and I think these numbers overall really speak to the importance of education with your staff and within your building, but it also speaks to education outside your building, especially if you're in a collaborative care environment, because when you connect with the providers outside of your office and they can start to initiate that conversation, patients become more comfortable with the decision process, or they've learned about the options ahead of time, because these aren't LASIK patients. They aren't coming in expecting to pay out of pocket. So if they have an understanding or expectation ahead of time, I think it helps them make a choice sooner and be more comfortable with their decision.
And to go along with that is making sure your referring doctors know what implants you're doing. Because you don't want that. We just talk about the lifestyle, and that's what our referring doctors say. We don't say, hey, you need a Synergy or you need a PanOptix. It's just, hey, there's presbyopic corrections that are available, and I'm going to refer you to Dr. Tanner or Dr. Nicole or whoever it may be, who's going to help you make that once in a lifetime decision. We have a few more minutes left. I do want to remind everybody, if you have any questions, please put in the chat box. We're going to try to leave a few minutes left for any questions that you may have. But to continue on, the opportunity to expand with patient selection, we have the various options that we talked about, making sure that we're ruling out ocular surface disease. Are you all following the ASCRS algorithm when it comes to the preoperative workup? Brian?
I would be lying if I said I knew exactly what you were referring to.
Okay.
So it's possible that I do incidentally, but not intentionally.
Okay. Nicole, Tanner,
yeah,
are you utilizing that?
I suspect I'm on the same page as Brian. I
Right.
suspect
So,
we are. We do a huge workup. So
I think it's really, the gist of it is, guys, is that there's something called the cornea. So there's
the back of the eye.
No, it's not the back of the eye. So, I think looking at the lids, first and looking at the tear film is really important. I love this slide because all of these presbyopic lenses either stretch light or split light. And I explain to patients that the first thing the light rays hit is your tear film. And if that is dysfunctional, you will hate any lens that I put in. And I think sometimes surgeons are like, and patients are like, let's go to surgery next week, right? But it's not only about optimizing the ocular surface before you get to surgery and your biometry measurements, but it's about keeping the ocular surface healthy after surgery. And I don't think we talk about that enough. There are so many patients that, depending on the drops that you're using, we're all going to less drops. They may at 1 week say, I'm just not seeing them. Well, you put a drop in and then all of a sudden they're 20/20. You know that lens is going to function. There's hope. But if you look at the ocular surface and it's pristine and they're only seeing 20/30 and things aren't going well, then you have to start the conversation but it's better to, find all these things out beforehand. So, when it happens, when you diagnose it beforehand, then it's their problem. When you diagnose this after, it's your problem. So, this part is such an important message to slow down. And often we see patients after they're dilated. So you can see they're already dry with PEK. If you suspect an issue, you have to bring them back, check them before you say officially that you're going to offer a certain presbyopia correcting technology.
Yeah. And then so you can see the various candidates for whether the extended depth of focus or the multifocal or trifocal. And I think we already went over that pretty well. And so what does amazing look like? And we're looking at potential treatment algorithms. I want you all to comment on these, on some of these here, and we'll just each of you comment on one of these for the sake of time. So Nicole, what signals are you looking for to determine the best fit for patient selection?
I want to know how they lived their life before, how they wear their glasses, what they do all day. And then I want to know what their dream is. And I want to see if my expectations of different technology matches with what their expectations are. So as I said in the beginning, really ask the patient, do you mind wearing reading glasses? If they say, no, I don't really mind wearing reading glasses, well, I may move that patient more into an extended depth of focus or a mini monovision strategy. So those are the signs. And the next thing I do is I say, do you read your phone without glasses? As I mentioned before. Yes, I read my phone without glasses. I know at that point, I need to do either an extended depth of focus or mini monovision, or this patient will not be happy. And so that helps me when I go down that road.
Tanner, you started mentioning this. How are you collaborating with ODs to form meaningful co-management relationships?
Yeah, so we do a lot of co-management and collaborative care in all of our practices. And we do like an annual educational event at each location. But I think more important than that to, kind of promote meaningful and trusting relationships is kind of checking in on a routine basis to make sure they're happy with the things we are going with at your office and that they're doing okay personally. I think, and just kind of those small interactions, I think, show appreciation for what they do for the patients. But I think it also builds trust and ensures that their patients are having a positive experience in your office. So those are some of the things we do.
Okay. And Brian, I'm going to skip to this question. What have you done differently in the past 12 months to improve your confidence in patient outcomes?
The biggest thing was switching from a la carte type of menu to a bundled single price, because it's taken the decision-making out of the hands of the patient from thinking, oh, maybe I'll go with option 2 because it's a little cheaper than option 3, or I'll go with option 3 because it's more expensive than option 2. And instead, it's a single price that allows me to take a fiduciary responsibility to ensure that I put that patient in the best optical setup that they could possibly have in their eyes without them having to worry about the individual split level costs of the technologies.
Perfect. And then we've answered a lot of these other questions that are there. Elephant in the room, we're looking at the point spread function, a simulation here. And we know that we can see the range or the focal points. So how are you addressing dysphotopsias? The glare and halos, we mentioned this earlier. Tanner, let's say a patient after surgery, do you do glare and halos? Yes. What is that conversation like? How are you addressing that?
I think the first thing, Nicole kind of mentioned this, is to do a really comprehensive exam. Make sure the tear film and the lids, that they're optimized from that standpoint, because if there's any type of tear film instability, then that could be contributing to the dysphotopsia. So addressing that first, and I think being aggressive about addressing it is super important. And then I think, studies have shown there's a 6-month kind of adaptation period, particularly with diffractive IOLs. So just leaning into the patient, kind of partnering with them, telling them you're on their team. And I think that kind of promotes confidence that they will improve over time.
Perfect. And then, so we already talked about the turnover on staff. We have several questions in the chat box, so I want to make sure we get into that. And so, just establishing that culture, communicating with your staff, educating with them, and, have them see, the wins and celebrate those within the practice, but always find opportunities that we can fine tune some of the things that we're doing. And so looking at for educational support, whether it's going to be with our collaborative partners, whether it's going to be with industry, it's important for all of us to work together. Getting the information to the patient pre-operatively or pre-visit so they have information about cataract surgery. What are their options? We talked about the pre-operative exam and what we go through and some of the questions, and you heard from the docs here that they're having that conversation with their patients themselves. Our practice, we have IOL counselors, and then when they see the surgeon, then the surgeon just fine-tunes and finalizes that. Setting proper expectations, we've talked about that, but then also making that strong recommendation is going to be key for our patients. And so I want you all to give me a quick final pearl when it comes to the best practices. Nicole, I'll start with you, and then we'll go into questions.
Well, the best pearl is to listen, and you have that right there. Number one, listen to your patient, take the time. I literally go in the room with an iPad with Rendia, and I draw everything and I show it to them so that they understand what they're choosing. In our office, when the only times we run into trouble is when we don't listen to the patient.
Tanner?
I think I'd like to emphasize the importance of patient education and continuing to educate the patients. We give these patients, they come in for a cat eval, we give them all this information, and then when they have a complaint of dysphotopsia at 1 week, we get frustrated because they didn't remember that this could happen at 1 week. But I think continuing to educate them, giving them the right piece of information at the right moment after the surgery and the postoperative period will help promote success with these lenses.
And Brian?
I think the key is to not inundate them with all of the information that we need to know, and focus what we tell them to be only the things that they truly need to know in order to expect properly what they're getting.
Yeah. And, for me, it's going to be communication. Communication is going to be key, making sure we're all on the same page and setting those proper expectations. And so thank you all for your pearls there. I want to get into some of the questions that we have. And Brian, since I see your face right now, first question's for you. What is the success rate of premium IOLs on patients status post LASIK, PRK, RK, or do you totally avoid and stick with the standard IOL?
Patients who are post-refractive become a little bit tricky for two main reasons. Occasionally, or often, some of these patients will have elevated higher order aberrations, which means that light that enters the eye gets scattered through the cornea before it even has the opportunity to hit the lens. In those patients, diffractive technology and even extended depth of focus technology tends to not work quite as well because you do have elevated dysphotopsias. That's why it's important for us to always look at the higher order aberrations in that cornea. The second and probably more important reason is that it's just more difficult to nail the refractive target. We are at over 80% success rate at being within a half diopter of spherical equivalence in a virgin cornea, but we're only in the 60% in a post-refractive eye. And if we don't nail our refractive target, then we're leaving patients with ametropia, and then they still might need glasses. And it's harder to fine-tune them with a laser because they're already post-refractive.
So this kind of follows that question. I'll give this to you, Tanner, since you mentioned the LALs. An experience with a light adjustable lens and results specifically with previous RK patients.
Yeah, so we've done it largely in 4-cut and 8-cut RKs and have had pretty favorable success. We've actually presented some data at ASCRS recently, and we'll be presenting an update this fall at AAO. But I think the only kind of pearl I would add to that is obviously the obvious adjustments to your technique with the incision location, but delaying the light adjustments until the refraction is stabilized postoperatively, because these are RK corneas, but so by definition they're unstable. And so waiting for that refraction to stabilize postoperatively before you start the light treatments, or even delaying the light treatments to see like the interval between them, is really helpful for success of those lenses in those patients.
Just to add that those patients have to have relatively normal placido imaging. And if they don't, then you can consider small aperture in the RK patient.
It's a great point.
Thanks. So another question is, curious of your opinions regarding the Vividi versus prior Restore 2.5 or the active focus lens. Nicole, you want to take that, or anyone?
Sure. I mean, for us, it's night and day. Vividi actually performs. The distance vision is, in our office experience, comparable to a monofocal. And they actually achieve intermediate, particularly if you do your dominant for distance and the non-dominant for -1/4 to -1/2 if they really want more and understand they'll need glasses for distance. The other thing is the Clarion material. I know we're running over just a little bit, but there was a lot of issues with the older Alcon material because of glistenings and subsurface nanoglistenings. Liliana Warner in 2019 published a paper showing that the best lens performing compared to Clarion ZCBU and MX60 was the Clarion material. So when Liliana Warner says something, I believe it. And so, I think we can put that to rest.
And Brian, this one's for you. A patient has a spherical cornea, but is -2.5 diopter, axis 90 refractively. Toric or no toric IOL? So it's a spherical cornea.
So it's a spherical cornea, but their refraction is -250, or their
-250, axis 90.
If their cornea is spherical post-operatively, then you're removing the astigmatism contributing factor, which is the lens in this case. Mm-hmm. And once that lens is out, if they have a spherical cornea, if they don't have SIL on their cornea, then no SIL, no toric.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, it has to do with the K readings, not the refraction. Sometimes the preoperative refraction will match if they don't have a really bad cataract, but you have to look at the Ks.
Nicole, what type of risk reversal do you offer if a patient hates the outcome of their advanced technology IOL?
Well, I mean, we are charging for a couple of reasons. One is it's a promise to, as Brian said, to help them no matter what the outcome. The other is to pay for technology that we're using intraoperatively and for the lens technology. So we actually don't have an additional 90 day. We just have a 365-day period. And if a patient's having trouble, whether it's 3 months, 6 months, we help the patient. So if they can't tolerate the diffractive technology, we gave them vermonidine, we gave them pilocarpine to bring the pupil down to deal with the diffractive dysphotopsia. Then we take the lens out and put in a monofocal. I don't really go to Vividi because I really just want to give them the most crisp vision after that. So, and I don't want to do 3 surgeries potentially. So that's where I go.
All right, last question. This is for you, Tanner, and then we'll close it out. Would you consider an EDOF multifocal for a monocular patient?
Yeah, I think you'd have to have a appropriate informed consent. But I'd be comfortable doing the EDOF option in a monocular patient.
Actually, Nicole?
Well, the EDOFs are so great for distance. I mean, the Symphony and the Vividi are really proving to be excellent distance lens. So I don't think they're giving it up. The only thing is they may not get that binocular summation and really get a little bit more of that intermediate that we're promising. So I think you have to have that caveat there.
Okay. And Brian, do you agree?
Agree with the other two.
All right, well, perfect. Hey, I want to thank you all for our panelists here for being on this. Thank you all the attendees for joining us. Some of these great questions that you all had. And as we told you, this was the exciting webinar that finally got you talking about presbyopia-correcting IOLs. So with that, thank you all very much and have a fantastic evening.